Hey, everybody. I want to welcome you to the forum on watchdogs and citizen-led public interest groups in Chattanooga, and how we hope that we can bring some more information, give you some more information about the groups that already exist, and also talk about ways that we can fill in the gaps where there aren't watchdog groups already in place. So we have two panelists here with me that I'm just thrilled to have. Melody Shikari, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself for us? You're an attorney in Chattanooga, right?
Yes. So I am an attorney from Chattanooga, moved back here after getting a law degree and a master in public administration. So I do really care about policy and law, and I actually have an undergrad business degree. So that intersection of business law and policy really is what I've been looking at for years. Moved back, and I'm now currently a criminal defense attorney in town. Do some civil matters, but mostly criminal defense.
Very cool. Well, yeah, we'll definitely dive a lot more into that in a minute. We have Helen Graves here as well. And if you could just introduce yourself and just briefly what you do and what you have been doing in Chattanooga.
Okay, my name's Helen Burns Sharp, and I grew up in Chattanooga, and I was a land use planner in my career, my professional career. Worked in Tennessee and in Cobb County in North Georgia, and then for the last 18 years was a planning director, community development director with the city in Oregon. So I sort of got some experience in local government in not only land use planning, but community and economic development. And when I retired, came back to Chattanooga and delighted, to be back, and really just intended to become a normal person. I was trying to figure out, my friend said that was never going to happen, but I was going to work it. I thought when you're retired, you're supposed to clip coupons and take naps or whatever. Well, I haven't done much of that because I found out about a tax incentive the city was doing back, this was in 2012, and I wasn't against it. And I had actually, this was tax income financing, had been familiar with it in my time in Oregon. But the more I started looking at it here, I started thinking, well, wait a minute, I've got some questions. And what I found out is that people, I don't know is that they didn't want to answer my questions, but I'm not sure they could answer my questions. This was Chattanooga's first TIF, and I think they were just kind of winging it. Not intending to do something bad or whatever, but the more questions I asked, the more sort of frustrated I got. And so I ended up filing an open meetings lawsuit about that, and then just started sort of a volunteer group called Accountability for Taxpayer Money. And we sort of focus on tax incentives, pilots and TIFs, and also on just overall accountability and transparency.
Very cool. So that's a great segue into what I wanted to talk about next, which is basically how do you begin an investigation? Like when you realize something is amiss or you see something that's odd, how do you what are your first steps? Take me through the first day that someone comes to you, hey, this is looking kind of weird. Where do you go from there?
I mean, it depends, I think. On the legal side, there's a lot of different ways to go with it. I think when we're talking about this, and Helen might have some experience with this, we have a huge issue right now in Chattanooga and in Hamilton County with FOIA requests. And because usually I think that's where you would start. You would say, oh, a Freedom of Information Act request. Usually it shouldn't cost much of anything. If anything, it should be open government information that is accessible. Right. I think we've stopped a lot of information, that transparency and accountability in Hamilton County in particular, because I think in Hamilton County, the last that I checked, you had to ask for it in person, which I think is intimidating. That they make it very for you to have to go in there and to request it. And then they have been trying to charge people. And I think the Times Free Press has done a really great job. And I think it might be Sarah Morgan at Times Free Press. He's had a whole saga of trying to get information about government things on the journalism side and being told it was going to cost money, being told it wasn't available, and getting significant pushback from the county. And I think this also will hide behind certain things. For example, I tried to get a police report once, and I was told that the information was too sensitive to release, even though my client was the subject, the victim of the police report. And I was getting it.
Tells me that maybe the information wasn't sensitive for the client. It was sensitive for the police.
I think you're right in terms of how they charged it. I think they undercharged something, and my victim client was not happy about it. But I was surprised that I actually got rejected. I think the city of Chattanooga will actually give you a rejection. I think the county's probably a little more hesitant and just ignores you or forgets. But usually I think you start there. And then interviewing various parties or soliciting more information from other people.
Right. So, Helen, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
I do. My experience has been, surprisingly, that I have done much better with the county than with the city. And conversations I had with the city attorneys is, back when I was department head, and I was in land use planning, that can be controversial. Neighbors want to know things, blah, blah, blah. And so, but anything they would ask, they would come to the counter and we would get it for them or whatever. And that was sort of the public service, kind of not necessarily on the spot, but we'd, make every effort to do that. And I think what we've done is we've made it very bureaucratic. I mean, there's certain things. I remember I went to City Hall and there was a page in the city budget that had been adopted, and I thought that I wanted a copy of it, and I didn't have my printer with me, at City Hall or in my car. So I thought, I'm at City Hall. I'll go in the finance department and ask them to make me a copy of page 10 or whatever. And they told me, and this went all the way to the top, to the head of the department, that I would have to file an open records request in order to get a copy of that page. Now, this is a public document that, has been adopted, that they probably have so many copies that they're using as doorstops.
Right.
And yet they told me I had to go through the formal open records process. So this is the kind of thing, I know there are times when we need to do that. But, I think that if we can change sort of the culture at City Hall and the courthouse, so that, they realize we're kind of all on the same team, or we should be, that this doesn't necessarily need to be adversarial. And a lot of times what you find is, and they ask you to, they ask for a degree, sometimes of specificity that you don't really necessarily have. I feel for them. I've been in local government. They got lots of things to do with their day jobs and all like that. And so we need to be careful about not doing frivolous kind of things. But I just think if we could dial the temperature down, my experience with city and county, when we give tax breaks, we have supposedly been making requirements that these companies give an annual report. And that ought to be pretty easy to get, but oh no, you have to file an open records request in order to get it. And I got it immediately, amazingly, from the county attorney. With the city of Chattanooga, it went on for about 6 weeks. And I'm thinking, what is this? I mean, I don't know that they were deliberately doing it, but obviously it didn't make me feel warm and happy, and thinking that they were trying to accommodate. And clearly, there was no question that it was public information. So anyway, if we can change the culture a bit, and then probably some other discrete steps that can be made to improve the process.
Well, on the culture point, everything I've always heard in the private sector is that the culture comes from the top down, essentially. What do you think the most important thing that whoever gets elected mayor could do day one to start basically showing, like, hey, this is the culture I want. I want this transparency. That wouldn't just be empty words.
I'll jump in on that, because I think the most critical thing the new mayor can do in terms of establishing a culture and atmosphere is commit to providing the city council and various boards and commissions with the information they need in order to make a decision. what happens now is that the mayor's office prepares agenda items. It shows up on a council agenda, and sometimes there might be a half-page resolution that, the mayor's office has prepared that says, we declare the following building surplus, and that's it. There's nothing, there's no staff report, there's no information in the resolution about why the mayor's office thinks this is a good idea or whatever. So I think giving city councilors and members of the Industrial Development Board and the Health and Ed Board the tools they need, the information they need, and also providing public hearings for some of the tax break things or whatever. We do that without public hearings, and remember that we forgave like $25 million worth of tax breaks in Hamilton County alone last year, and we don't even have a designated time for the public to comment on that. And obviously, what needs to happen is some of this information needs to be available ahead of time. And also we need to ask the chamber to follow certain criteria that we've never developed in order to decide what to bring forward or whatever. But I just think providing information to decision makers and to the public about the public's business, I think would just, improve things enormously.
Absolutely. And so, Melody, a follow-up for you on that question would be from a legal perspective, how difficult would it be for the mayor to implement those suggestions?
I think it's a hard thing. I mean, I know that the city attorney serves at the pleasure of the mayor for sure. There is, and this, I'm usually someone that likes to do things by consensus. I believe in good government, so I believe that whatever they do will eventually come out. But I can see city attorneys and sometimes the county attorneys trying to prevent things from being released, right? And I think they do get they have to be able to do their job as well. So I am a little bit post the idea that a county mayor can set the tone, and at the point where I'm just like, let's start getting these things in court, and discovery is a hard thing to get around. Like there's just not a lot that a judge will let you not reveal in discovery. They won't let you hide it, and then they start accruing penalties when you are hiding it. It's a little different with TIF because I think you're trying to find an issue and encourage accountability. On the criminal justice side, where I typically work, it's become necessary because these groups, the police department, sheriff's office, they are determined to keep certain things away from the public eye because they don't even like when there's articles about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So at this point, I'm at the point where it's like, how can we also maximize our use of lawsuits to get the most information we possibly can, because they are expensive and time consuming and,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for everyone involved. Helen, did you want to jump in on that?
I want to weigh in on that about the importance of the city and county attorney. This has nothing to do with the people who have held those positions. I think they're competent attorneys and good people or whatever, but I clearly believe the culture is that they are appointed by and do whatever the mayors want them to do. You don't, and that we really need, like in Chattanooga, the city attorney is in the charter designated the chief ethics officer. So you would think this ought to be somebody that we can count on. And yet I have found in several instances where I felt like that the city attorney, and sometimes they even say that. I mean, they'll even say, well, Mayor so-and-so wants me to do this, or we know that Mayor so-and-so does not want there to be policies for tax breaks because that might, mean they might not have as much flexibility or whatever. So, the city and county attorneys are really important, but they need to be they need to have some degree of independence, and maybe we'll get into later. I think our form of government is all screwed up, and I think if we were to talk about the change in form of government, I think that would take care of a lot of things we're talking about right now. But that's later on if we have time, if you want to get into that.
What do you mean by change in form of government?
Okay, well, right now in Chattanooga, we have a strong mayor form of government, and do we ever? Really, no way in the world the city council is a co-equal branch. It's just not.
Mm.
And they don't even have any professional staff. Okay? And so they are, and the people, the department heads and the people the mayor hires, they really believe they work for the mayor. That's who appoints them or whatever. And the city attorney believes he works for the mayor. So if I'm not saying they're not cordial and helpful to city councilors, but they really don't have any professional staff. And so, what I think, and also because we have a strong mayor on things that particularly that I'm concerned about, like tax breaks, that means for developers, most of whom are very upstanding and good people and all like that, but for those handful, who might be trying to do, some intense lobbying in order to get a tax break, they've only got one person really to go to. And so I'm a strong proponent, having worked in it for 18 years, of a council manager form of government, where you have the mayor and the council. And guess what? The mayor is at the meetings. Right now in the city, you don't ever see the mayor. You see the mayor when the mayor wants to be seen, but it's never at a city council meeting. So, and also the department heads and the city attorney, work for the entire mayor of council, 9 councilors plus the mayor, and then they then hire a professional city manager, who then hires department heads and key staff based on, guess what, professional qualifications, as opposed to, just so-and-so help me in my next election. I mean, some people who work on the election are very, very competent and qualified, so I'm not trying to put those down, but, we just need more professionalism, and there is a strong ethic among the city managers that, there's a lot of, I think, integrity there and professionalism there, but I just think that would help that would take care of the balance of power, because it would give the council so much more power than they have now. But the mayor does not become a figurehead. He does more than he or she more than kiss babies and cut ribbons. I mean, obviously, and there are a couple of cities around here, like Greenville, South Carolina, Maryville, Tennessee, Charleston, South Carolina, that have mayor council governments that do really well and tend to rank pretty highly, when groups look at, best cities.
Right. So I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned a little bit earlier in that, which was basically that the people that the mayor hires, or who are hired by people he hired, feel that loyalty to the mayor, right? Like they feel like they work for the mayor, not the people, which is really the people that have hired. Now, so and I'll direct this at you, Melody, having lots of legal experience on both civil and criminal cases. I'm really concerned with corruption and basically pay to play, buying FaceTime with public officials. What would be your suggestions on how a local prosecutor, a local district attorney, could more aggressively investigate cases like that?
I think it's tricky. And let me backtrack initially and say we have a weird system of government because we have a layer, right? We have the county, which everybody is a part of. And then on top of that, we have the city. And actually we have at least 4 different cities that I know of that have courts. But then additionally, I think just other, so we have Saudi Daisy, Red Bank. Those are all ones people that live in those areas can't vote. Collegedale, what was the last one? Within the county, Eastridge. So the prosecutor is a county level position and prosecutes on behalf of both the city and the county, which is not on the civil side. On the civil side, the city attorney goes into court, but you will never see a city attorney in court in Hamilton County unless they are challenging a CPD, Chattanooga police video, if they try to press. And so that makes it a little bit difficult because now we're talking about the county prosecutor going after things. I think it also gets very political. We have opposite parties dominating in these two entities. And so I'm a little bit hesitant on the criminal side, on the local level. What you said is in my view, having moved here, our corruption is it's soft, but it's pervasive, right? We are a city based on people who have paid to get we've had a lot of money that came from Coca-Cola bottling and lots of old money in town coming from the mountains, Lookout Mountain, Signal Mountain. Yeah. So it's not as sinister, and I don't know about how much it falls on the wrong side of the law in terms of
there's no quid pro quos, for example. But
not exactly, but it definitely works that way, right?
Yeah.
In terms of
hey, my dad invested in your, son's whatever, I'm running for a campaign, wink, wink, that kind of deal.
That's why I think watchdog groups and the fact that we don't have a robust watchdog community, I think Helen probably started it in terms of because it's not fun being that person that goes around town asking questions and kind of being seen as the problem. I think people like to think that folks like to be the problem. And I think it takes a lot for someone to say, you know what, I think this is really important. I'm going to sit here and keep asking questions about it until somebody starts answering.
Yeah.
I think your work, Helen, is the reason that groups like Caleb have started forming, because other people said, that's a good question. There are other questions that we have. And, we have a severe lack of national organizations operating here. I'm on the state board for the ACLU. I still have trouble getting the ACLU to look at legal issues in Chattanooga, even though I think there's a lot that mirror what's going on in Memphis and in Nashville, where a lot of their cases are based. So I am constantly saying we need more watchdog groups, and hoping that if we get more things in court and we get money from them, like monetary, I want that to be reinvested in watchdog groups in Chattanooga to keep the cycle going.
It's a snowball.
Right. To make sure that they're somewhat funded to ask these questions, because I know Helen's been doing this volunteer for a long time, and, it's hard to fit in extra meetings outside of kids and family and career and all these things. And then it's hard to go against some of the forces in Chattanooga, because the quid pro quo is that getting along, right? Getting along to get things done has been seen as the gold standard here. But a lot of times they don't serve the majority of the people that are here.
Right.
They serve a few people that make a significant amount of money off of it.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to touch on a little bit to you, Helen, was where do you see the gaps in between the watchdog groups, yours that you started, Caleb, am I getting that name right? I consistently mess that one up. But Caleb and any other, smaller watchdog groups, where do you see things falling between the cracks there?
Well, let me pick up on what Melody said earlier. I think we just have kind of we just have so few. When I ended up filing a lawsuit, I filed it against the city of Chattanooga, Hamilton County, and the Industrial Development Board. And when I didn't want to do this, it was the last thing in the world I intended to do. I mean, and I care about my community. I was wanting to get re-involved in it. I wasn't thinking, I'm going to come move back from Oregon and sue everybody. But I started looking around to try to see, I think I'm kind of on to something. There's some things in here that aren't necessarily corrupt, but they're just not quite right. And so I thought, surely there's a good government league here. Nope. Surely there's a League of Women Voters chapter. Not at that time. There had been a very robust one, and then it had gone inactive, and now it's back. And even with them, speaking of gaps, I think the league here is good, but they have been so focused, understandably, it's the League of Women Voters. So they've been focused on voting, because I found out when I was making my pitch for the council mayor form of government that another form of government I think we should look at objectively would be a unified government, a metropolitan government, city and county government, or whatever. And who did the gold standard on combining Chattanooga and Hamilton County? The League of Women Voters back in the 1960s. Well, our current league people had no idea, because, they didn't, the league can do more. So I'm hoping the league will do more. But, you talk about Caleb, and that's so wonderful, I think, because it's primarily young people and it's people that live in neighborhoods that haven't benefited as much from Chattanooga's Renaissance. I mean, there really clearly is a sort of a two Chattanoogans thing at play here. So, but we definitely need more. I mean, I have found, ATM, my group is, it's loose. I have an email list to network, and if I need to try to rally some people to come to a meeting, and if people have questions, and we have a website, et cetera, et cetera. But we definitely need more people focused on these kind of things. And maybe Caleb can sort of be the beginning. They've got sort of a three-pronged approach. They're concerned about economic mobility. They're concerned about criminal justice. And they're concerned about education. Well, hey, those are pretty important things, right?
Right.
And so, so not that Caleb, I don't want to put the burden of the world on them, but I think they're providing kind of an excellent model, for how to do it, how to broaden the base, how to bring other people to the table.
That's very interesting. So it's striking me now that like there could be some niche, watchdog groups that come up, but it would probably, if you want to help, if you think watchdog groups are important, then you should really join, one of the ones that's already, like Caleb's doing great stuff, like that it might be more worth your while to join and help someone that's already got the ball rolling.
Sort of, but I don't discount the fact that we need multiple people kind of pulling from different sides. And so it doesn't hurt to say that Helen's group is with Caleb on a particular issue, is with the Criminal Association of Defense. Okay. That's right. How creating that little chamber of like different groups kind of saying the same thing is, I think, somewhat helpful. Their model is really good they focused on individual things like the bail fund. Now I know that they're advocating and having conversations about is ending cash bail, which I think was their goal, but they kind of started with something attainable, which was great to have when money started coming in the protest times for bail, right? People wanted to donate to a local group. Luckily, Caleb had put it in a year or two ago. So now we have a local group for you to donate for, bail funds for protesters and things like that. So thank goodness we had a local group. If you did, then all of that momentum would have gone to some national organization that maybe would never have seen the light of day in Chattanooga.
Well, that's great to hear, actually, that you think that there's still room basically for more watchdog groups, because people have reached out to me and wanting to start things like that, and basically I was waiting until I'd had this conversation, kind of didn't want to step on anyone's toes, but I think that's a great idea that we can all help each other out here, as far as just.
I do encourage going to meetings and players are, and making sure that there is something. But if it doesn't fall into one of their buckets, I don't think someone necessarily needs to go in there and try to add it to what they're doing. I think coordinate. I think Helen coordinates excellently with them and with her group. Absolutely.
What I appreciate is because I'm sort of an old timer. I think their median age is 30 or something like that. And, I'm sort of the historian or whatever, but I've learned some stuff from them, in terms of, they're good at, I can start talking about tax breaks and policies and all like that. And even people who really like me and believe my message, I can see them falling to sleep. And sometimes I almost fall asleep when I just ramble on about these criteria and all like that. This Caleb Economic Mobility Task Force took some of the dull stuff I've been saying for years, and they came up with some cartoons that showed this is what the process looks like. Look, here's an applicant at the Chamber of Commerce, and look, it's going to the city council without a public hearing and things like that. So they did that, and another, people who are good at community organizing know this, but like I say, I've been sort of the lone wolf myself, is that they're very good about, number one, they're not confrontational. I've tried to be civil, but every now and then I can probably have gotten a bit snarky at city council meetings and things like that. But they're very, cordial. They're non-confrontational, but they, at the end, they have these asks, they're very specific about what they want. And they've been savvy enough to come up with some things that one would think would be no-brainers. Like, do you think to have some policies before we give away $25 million? Do you think we should, have public hearings so the public maybe can have a comment? So, but anyway, this idea of having specific asks, and so, my stuff, and I think my website, which is atmchat.com, it's got a lot of information, but, it's good resource stuff. It's also very good if you're having trouble falling asleep at night, because it has no graphics and it has long sentences and it's just sort of plods along. But I think
I've used your website numerous times during this the last few weeks. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for all the effort you put into it.
And I guess I'll add an effort that I tried to do that ended up kind of dropping, which was initially we were going to work with Caleb, but the criminal defense lawyers were going to try to get private prisons out of Hamilton County. Well, guess what? That kind of just happened. We had a working group. We were going to start making it kind of more public, collecting grievances. We knew there was a whole list. I just knew from my own personal experience about the list. And I've been in the facility and it hadn't been great. And then they up and left. So it's like, okay, well, what's the next thing we want to do now? So, Core Civic's not at Silverdale anymore. It's run by the sheriff. I think we have some serious issues with the sheriff's office, but that was, I won't count it as a win because I don't think we really had anything to do with it. But now we're turning our sights on other initiatives, like other issues that are coming up. And so that's one thing that you just to watch out before you do something too official. Something comes up and you might not even be needed for that anymore. So that was one experience we had recently. And I was planning on using the lawsuit route, and I actually we are still planning to file a lawsuit against CCA on some of the things that I think people suffered. And I believe that they are entitled to funding for that. That's what I'm talking about, that money, some monetary value, then going into a watchdog group over the jails long term. Because when you don't have a clear victim, and I'll count like the community is at large, if you don't have a clear victim, it's really hard to follow up on some of these issues. TIFs are one of them. Who is the victim of that? It is the whole community when we don't have those dollars. But it's not like one person in particular is like victimized by that. With the jails, it's people are kind of are seen as the lowest members of our community. And so they're not empowered to speak up for themselves. And a lot of them want to forget the entire experience if they never have to go through it again. So that's something like trying to get people empowered to speak up, either about something kind of esoteric, like what Helen is advocating for, which I've seen the numbers, Helen. I know it's crazy. The TIFs, like behind the scenes, the document, it's like, how did my high school with all its money get, a TIF? I went to GPS, just so everybody knows, how did they get a TIF for something? And Baylor and Macaulay and all these schools, who's really benefiting from that?
Yeah, pretty ridiculous that they would get that. Yeah.
Oh, and they have, all of them have. I think they're all on the list. Helen, have you ever seen a list of all the TIFs in town?
And they're not TIFs. Isn't this the PPP program or whatever? I mean, TIFs are tax increment financing. Are you talking about the money that Congress made available that certain schools took advantage of? No, you're not talking about that.
City TIF. We'll talk offline about it more because I've seen.
Well, I know what you're talking about.
I'm talking about the
private schools go to the Health and Ed Board to get revenue bonds to take advantage of their tax exempt status. And what I've been told is that there's no, that doesn't affect local governments at all. So, I mean, so in other words, they can borrow money at the same rate local governments do. Okay. And so it's not like a pilot is a giveaway. A TIF is means that these sometimes very valuable properties aren't going to be paying their fair share of property taxes for 20 years towards general fund things. Can I do a shout out to another group I just thought of?
Absolutely.
So we've kind of been talking about tax breaks and criminal justice and things like that. There's a group that a guy named Jim Johnson formed as kind of a Facebook group. It's called Chattanoogans for Responsible Development. And you talk about something that is really needed. Unfortunately, here again, my land use planning background, I lived in a city that was basically flat, and then we annexed an area that had a few little hills that were kind of like speed humps. And one of the first things we did is adopted hillside standards, wanting to make sure that any development that happened, didn't cause problems for other people or for the people who were building houses or developing there. And it has really surprised me, particularly North Chattanooga, when you drive around looking at some of this development, you just think, and I understand infill development's tough. That's a very, a desirable area. I get that. I'm not saying we shouldn't have any development there, but we need to be careful, and we need to have tools in our toolbox. And what is happening clearly, and this is something I typically try to give the city council a pass and blame everything on the mayor. No, not going to give them a pass on this. I think they have been lobbied so strongly for the past few years by the home builders and all, trying to say, oh, we just can't have any of these regulations, or we just wouldn't have any development. Well, guess what? Asheville has these regulations. Lots of very highly desirable cities have these regulations. And one of the things Chattanooga has going for it is this incredible environment. With the hills and the streams and the this, that, and the other, but we've got to protect those things. And I can remember in my old life, we would require if somebody wanted to develop on a, top of a hill that had property beneath it, that they would have to have a geotech report before they could get a building permit.
Well, if I can cut you off for 1 second, is that sort of similar to what happened with the subway at the bottom of Signal Mountain that just got wiped out?
Exactly. And a lot of people don't understand that if this happens to them, that their homeowner's insurance does not cover it.
Right.
And there's even a question. That guy was quoted in the paper as saying, I'm trying to spread the word that people need to get flood insurance, even though they may not think they're in a flood area. But I've done some investigating for a friend in North Chat, and it's really kind of I'm not sure, they don't, it's hard to get policies. Is this a mudslide or, it's kind of like earthquakes or whatever. I mean, if you want to pay and get special coverage, who do you go to? But then again, right. And you may want that extra protection, but somebody you would like to think that your local government is getting the information they need, and I really believe the staff with the city is trying to do a good job, but they just don't have the tools that they have. So they were saying, well, when these houses along the street developed, that on that sort of mountaintop up above them, it wasn't owned by the same developer. Well, of course, the same developer has now bought that or whatever, but regardless of who owns it, it's kind of like when you do a traffic study. You don't just do it based on your business. You look at what's going on, pass-through traffic, other commercial development or residential traffic or whatever. I mean, that is such a narrow, short-sighted version. But your example of the subway, because I've been using that example to my friend about get flood insurance, and then she checked it out and she said, I don't know that I can. I mean, I can, but I don't know that if I had a claim that it would even cover it.
That's something that made me about a year and a half ago, 2 years, whenever that happened, really made me interested in these watchdog groups, because my big question was, the first thing I thought is, like, okay, those things do happen, but when those things happen, my first question is who is the contractor that was hired to look at that hill and say it was safe? If there wasn't a contractor hired, then who decided not to hire that contractor, and why? And if that happened, what can we do to stop that from happening again? Because the only reason that everyone inside wasn't killed was because several hours before the flooding happened, the mudslide happened, they decide that the owner said, yeah, don't come in 2 hours late to work today because it's raining so hard. I mean, it was a fluke that this was not fatal. And so we it's going to happen again if we don't make these systematic changes and ask these questions.
And so what needs to happen is that these developers who developed and this is green tech, by the way, I'm not trying to point any fingers, but I will. And the street is Carrington Way, and there are these houses at the foot, and then they have slowly, as they look at their back window, there used to be trees and there used to be vegetation, and now the developers who have now have bought the property at the top on Notting Hill, they have cleared all of this because they want to build houses up there on the top. And so, what the city is saying to some of the homeowners this is the city technical staff, not the political people. They've said, well, we will require land disturbance permit for the entire thing. They weren't sure that they had gotten one, and they said, well, we can fine them. Well, when you're making the kind of money these people are making, our fines are just minimal. I mean, they'll pay fines. That is not the answer. The answer is to say, stop, halt. We need to make sure of what the impact's going to be, and we need we need the big picture look. I mean, look at the retaining wall that Publix built in North Chattanooga, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's about as tall as the Empire State Building, and these people in these little houses on Carrington Way, they've got something, a nice little thing in your garden, about 3 feet tall, but I mean, it wouldn't afford any degree of protection,
right?
And so so this is where, as I said, I'm on the council. I've said, what do they want their legacy to be? I mean, I just don't get this. I mean, I think they all need to be put in a van and driven out there and saying, is this right? I mean, and it's probably too late for these people, right? They just but
they've made their choice. Yeah.
I mean. Yeah, so that, I mean, that's an illustration of how this doesn't, there are all sorts of kind of issues that lend themselves to there being this watchdog group. And here again, I'll have to shout out to Jim Johnson, who's a very smart, nice, non-confrontational, wants to work with people if at all possible, kind of. But at the same time, Jim Johnson's not afraid to call the question. He ended up getting blamed for Publix being delayed on South Broad, but he because of him and his efforts, it's going to be some better than it would have been had he not done.
Well, and that brings me into a question that I have for Melody, which is, again, from a legal perspective, what laws, like, let's say you are now the legislative branch of the county, you yourself, what's the first law you would unilaterally write that you think would help this development situation?
Well, you said the problem. There isn't a legislative branch of the county government. There's nothing that you can, all the decisions get made, as Helen pointed out, by the mayor and whatever staff is in whatever department. I don't know if I think we need a billion other laws. I think enforcement is always your problem, right? If you've got laws that keep, then what's the point?
So that's really interesting. You're saying that basically, if we wanted to solve the problem with the laws on the books, it's an enforcement issue, not adding more laws.
It's a willpower issue, probably. I mean, like Helen said, we should be building things to last, and for it to be. And I think they've got the tools to ask for certain things. Because I think the approval process allows for there to be questions and for things to happen before you actually allow somebody to build on a particular area. Helen might know more specifically on those kind of actual rules. On the criminal justice side, I think it's just there's a lot of grievances and the complaints aren't really being answered. So I don't think there's even a law that's the thing about laws. I don't think you could write whatever you wanted for the county, but I don't think that's going to make our jails more humane. I think actually giving public awareness to what those issues are will probably do more good. I like what you said, Helen, about Jim being effective. He wasn't effective because he created a lawsuit. He was effective because he aired out kind of what those issues were. And I'm a big, there's a legal side of it for sure that can be useful, but there's the court of public opinion, which can be huge. Yeah. And so that's part of the reason I support journalists so much in Chattanooga and elsewhere, because they're doing the work. What did someone say today on Twitter? One of my favorites at the Times Free Press said that she's been blocked by multiple elected officials in Hamilton County. And she was like, what does that say about me? And it's like, well, it says you probably do your job pretty well.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want to hear what you have to say, because every article is questioning, and rightly so. So the law isn't always going to help you out as much as just knowledge and information.
Yeah, the court of public
creative ways of saying it. So finding the money to get and money and talent to get the message through to people, I think is
right. So. Go ahead, Ellen. No, go ahead.
Well, I'll shout out to the media that one of the things, yes, I had to file a lawsuit, which was the last thing I intended to do, but I was getting ignored, and I thought, well, maybe this will get their attention. And it did, although they didn't really change anything. But then, though, in the court of public opinion, I think the press was fairly favorable, the Helen versus Goliath kind of thing. I think, people thought, well, here's one person who's trying to make a difference, who's raising questions that need to be raised. Going back to about changes in county government, and I don't know the criminal justice system, but just generally, if we would just change the culture and sort of embrace transparency just across the board. And I want to shout out again to Hamilton County for their finance department. There is now a requirement. It's started a few years ago by the Government Accounting Finance Review Board, something or other. Anyway, it's called GASB. And I'm not an accounting financial person at all, but I've learned about this. But anyway, they came out with a rule that said local governments throughout the country, you will disclose every year in your audit, which is now called a CAFR, you will disclose how much money you have not collected due to tax incentives. And this was not being done hardly anywhere before, but because of this obscure accounting rule, everybody had to do it. Well, some people did it sort of fitting and, screaming and kicking. And like the city of Chattanooga, you go to their website, it said it was last updated in 2015. Well, really? I believe this is 2021. Hamilton County, and I have bragged on this, I'm on the board of a group called TCOG, Tennessee Coalition for Open Government. Right. And I have taken the spreadsheet that Hamilton County does and said, I think this is a model for not only the state, but the country. It is so good. It is so thorough. Just Google Hamilton County pilots. And you can do it in Excel or PDF or whatever, but you can see every agreement. You can click on it and read the actual agreement. You can see what commitments they made, if anything. And then on the right-hand side, it'll say, net cost of the tax incentive. So that's where this number of 25 million comes up. And you've got to remember that 25 million, a lot of our tax breaks last 10, 20, and 30 years. So, that's just a snapshot in time or whatever. But that's an example, and that was the professional staff with the Hamilton County Finance Office. And I know when I went to meet with them, I kind of thought, well, they're probably calling Mayor Coppinger and saying that this troublemaker is over here or whatever. But they could not have been more professional, more gracious. And one of the things I liked is, they don't put any spin on it, nor did I want them to. I just, to be able to go to something and get the facts and to be able to deal with people. Like I made a couple of suggestions like, well, why don't you, consolidate the Volkswagen and Amazon on the spreadsheet so it's, more clear or whatever. And they were very accommodating in that regard. So anyway, I just, I heard as a young planner, I heard Alex Haley speak in Memphis, and he said we should find the good and praise it. So I, non-finance person, am praising the Hamilton County spreadsheet on pilots and tips.
That's very interesting. Yeah, and I think that from what I'm hearing here, it almost sounds like a good watchdog group would be people that are involved, like young people who are sort of, tech savvy, good at researching, who could kind of almost freelance for the freelance volunteer for the already existing watchdog groups. If one of them has a big case coming up or as a big investigation, it's just all these more heads that can be pulling public information and parsing through public records together.
Yeah, I mean, that's if we can get them. And I feel about public records.
You're right. Well, I was just
but one thing Helen said that's interesting. I mean, I guess with the city and the county being separate, we can see how they are better in some things and not so good in others. But it's not very. One thing I think we can agree on is it's not super consistent, and it's a lot based on who's in the staff at various places and kind of what approach they're taking on things. So.
Sort of like based on norms rather than laws and rules. Like people do it because they, this is like the precedent is, we give it out rather than like we are legally required to do this by X date or whatever.
Yeah. And I don't know why they did the Excel, and it seems like the easiest thing to do is just post an Excel of what you're keeping track of internally and then putting it out there for everyone to see. It sounds like what that is.
That's exactly right. I mean, and they don't have to even put it on their website. They can bury it just in their report. But I mean, it is just a really, really nice example. Another thing too, we're living in such a time where there's so much information, and trying to get it all together. For example, I ran across something on Twitter where a political scientist at UTC, I believe his name's Chris Zack, I don't know him, but okay, and he had done on the 9 council districts in Chattanooga. He had broken them down, and these were estimates, but very educated estimates by race and ethnicity. And, I guess I knew that probably that existed somewhere, but I didn't necessarily know where. But, he did the research. And yet, we've got all of these little kind of fragments out there. And, we need I don't know, we need some sort of just database of, more than statistics, because, what you've got to do is figure out, well, what do these things mean? And certainly to the African-American community, what it means is, there was a time where it looked like that, maybe 4 of the 9 council districts might be majority minority, and like in the district I live in, District 7, it is one of the most gentrified in the downtown area, the south side area, whatever. So it is sort of equal, but it is also where most of the Hispanics are. So it is a real, District 7's kind of become a melting pot, which is sort of interesting,
Right. Right. Well, I really appreciate y'all. Before we wind down completely here, we have at least 1 or 2 questions in the comments here. One of them is, Helen, what is happening with the Etna Mountain TIF? I followed that case with great interest and so admired what you did.
So I've tried to put that, thank you for the question. I've kind of tried to put that in my past because, it did get done. And so it is what it is. And it was for a 20-year period, and it was approved in 2013. So about 8 years have happened, and we've got some more to go. And so the way it works is the people that live in the boundary of that area, their property taxes, they pay them, but rather than going for fire and police and trash and all like that, they go to the developers to help pay for the cost of the road up the mountain and the sewer line up the mountain. And so I think that development is that I don't believe the road is finished and there are no houses on top of the mountain, but I think they are moving towards that. And so, that was, it was quite the education for me. And as I said, I ended up saying I never had anything against Black Creek as a community or against the development. Right. It was just that, it just seemed like that just wasn't, not all the questions were raised. And I don't think people knew how to, what they were or how to raise them because they had no background with tips.
Sure. And then we'll do one last question and then let y'all conclude here. We have one from someone named Griffin, and that is, what, in your opinion, is the most egregious abuse of power or corruption in the last 10 years within Chattanooga?
I don't know if Helen wants to. The way that I'll answer that question is the last thing I wanted to add in about the power of watchdog groups and what's possible. I was just looking at that pilot list that you had, Helen, and Volkswagen's definitely on there. I don't know how many people care about the environment or watched when Chattanooga was displayed over all of the documentaries about the cheating that they did, the straight up lying that they did with their emission testing. And I was at the time a fellow in the city government, and I told somebody, because we don't put any money towards sustainability, so the sustainability office is kind of not as powerful as it could be. And I said, I really don't understand why the city hasn't talked to Volkswagen about making some sort of contribution back to our community and make it a good PR thing for Volkswagen and make it something that actually gives us some money, because our name was over that, whatever that documentary was in 2016 where they had revealed it. I mean, they revealed that technology that ended up, or that electric vehicle or whatever it was in Chattanooga. So it says Chattanooga all over the place. And instead of doing that, we prioritized a good relationship with whatever the reason was. Nothing ever happened to it. And it was such a missed opportunity because they probably needed the good press anyways. And it really helped on some other things because they got so much, the millions of dollars savings on taxes, and we never had
about $500 million.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. So a lot more than I even thought. Maybe just that. I was thinking that 1 year, but what a missed opportunity. Why? I don't even think the subject was even broached at all. And we patted them on the back and said that we stood by them, and stood by them for nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I thought that's a great answer to that. Helen, would you like to answer with the same or a different abuse? Or
I will. I'm not sure I would use the term abuse, but sort of a dereliction of duties kind of thing with Volkswagen. I think it was one of the few instances. I'm not a big fan of pilots. TIFs sometimes can be good, sometimes not. But pilots are just basically kind of giveaways, and they can be important if something's really going to be special and employ a lot of people and pay jobs, et cetera, and where you think you wouldn't get it anyway, because we've given a lot of pilots to companies that would have done what they were going to do and pay property taxes, but we just give them the thing anyway because they asked. But with Volkswagen, so what we did is we just basically let them write the agreement, so we didn't put anything in there about wages. We let it go for 30 years rather than for 20 years, et cetera, et cetera. But we have had now 2 opportunities to revisit that first one. And one of them, I think, was before the emissions scandal, but there's been one since. And what I found is I have been interviewed by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and a television station in Huntsville, Alabama, about Volkswagen. And I'm saying, what? Why do you want to talk to me? I don't know that much about Volkswagen. I'm glad they're here. Yes, I think they got the sun, the moon, and the stars, and we could have given them the sun and the moon or whatever. Right. But what I found here, gets back to what Melanie is saying, is that no one will, they're just in fear about saying anything negative about Volkswagen. I bet Volkswagen would respect us more if we did ask some questions. I mean, everybody after the emissions scandal got something from Volkswagen except the city of Chattanooga and Hamilton County. Because
we got something from Volkswagen. We got a bunch of bad PR.
Yeah, well, true. And so, I think that, that it's, I mean, they're just kind of on automatic pilot with the idea. And they even worked out a deal. Check this out. We do have a very good pilot policy that says that you pay school taxes in full. Okay, that's good. But Volkswagen said, okay, we pay our school taxes in full, but they didn't want to pay their stormwater fee to the city. And stormwater fees are based on amount of impervious surface. And so, the biggest one around would be Volkswagen. It would be about $850,000 a year. They didn't want to pay that, they said. And so they said, if you want to collect that, just take it out of our school taxes. So the schools are losing $850,000 current dollars for 30 years. And you know, we have an opportunity when they come back, as they always seem to every few years with an expansion or whatever, you know, to revisit that. But, you know, we need to get some, I don't know quite the word to use. This is not cable television, is it? So language here, but you know, we need. This has been my biggest frustration around here is that, you know, it's one thing to appreciate the jobs and everything the private sector does for us, but who is looking out for the public interest?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, workers and the community at large, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Well, and I mean, we have to wrap up here for sure, but yeah, I thought that was a great point, and the only point I kind of wanted to close with before I hand it over to y'all to say shout out your plugs for whoever you want to you know, plug whatever you're doing is just that yeah, like as far as you were saying about you know, we need somebody who's going to speak truth to power essentially, and to say. To play hardball with Volkswagen. Like, look, we know what leverage we have over Volkswagen. Yeah, they give us a bunch of jobs and we want them to stay here.